Making these films about Astley Green made me want to find out more about the Austerity steam engine which is featured in these films. So I met up with Steven Oakden at the Embassy Steam Railway in Yorkshire, where they have one of these steam engines. And Steven, who had written a number of articles about these engines, told me more.
You get one of these on a heavy train and the noise is terrific, so they're very exciting to sort of actually work on or to watch in traffic. I've seen them work trains of up to 400 tonnes at Bickershaw Colliery, up very steep gradients, and they were masters of doing that. So that shows you that sort of weight with an engine that weighed 48 tonnes itself. It was pretty good going. The design was originated in the war, for the Second World War, when they wanted a robust shunting locomotive. And there were certain specifications that they wanted an engine to pull over 1,000 tonnes on the level. And so one of the designs that was mooted for use was the Ginty, but they decided not to proceed with that. It sprung from an existing Hunslet design. Hunslet already had a big 060 saddle tank, so they adapted that design and produced the Austerity from that. The NCB started buying surplus ones that the Army didn't want and started using those at the collieries, and then they started ordering them themselves. They produced them up to 1964 when the last ones were made. You've got your valve gear, you've got your connecting rods, it's all in between the frames. Very, very crammed in. The big ends on the Austerities used to knock and bang. And once you try to fit one yourself, you realise that they're so awkward. This is why the pit fitters didn't like maintaining them. That your brass is in two halves and it's held on with a strap that fastens onto the back of the connecting rod. And the brass was slipping within the strap all the time. And we were trying to pack this brass out to keep it in the right position. And eventually there were three of us trying to put this brass back on. We did it eventually, but the disappointing thing was that it's still knocked after we'd done it. I always thought that the NCB would probably want an outside cylinder locomotive because of getting at the parts. Walkden, they had a very keen locomotive superintendent, a man called Joe Cunliffe, and also the workshop manager, Johnny Bronson, were both very keen on the Austerities. And I've seen it written in reports that the Austerities were doing excellent work. So they took a great interest in the locos and they started to do various modifications. And perhaps the biggest problem I had at Walkden was people complaining about the smoke from the locomotives when they were going up the bank to Ashton's Field. The estate's backed onto the railway. And so the housewives were complaining about the smoke and obviously sparks and all sorts of things coming out of the engines going up the bank. So Joe Cunliffe started looking at how they could perhaps get rid of the smoke that the engines were making. So one of the things they did was to put 6 pipes from the front of the smoke box through the tubes to take air into the firebox. And that actually worked very well. Another idea was they took a steam feed from the cab, and there used to be a small pipe that used to run along the top of the saddle tank onto a ring on the top of the chimney, and they could just make steam jets come out of this ring and it would disguise the smoke. So it wasn't actually doing anything to minimise the smoke, it was just disguising it. Walkden also got involved with the Underfeed stokers. And Walkden got 3 sets that they put on themselves. One set went on to Hurricane, which was at Bickershaw Colliery. It was apparently a great success. One of the drivers at Bickershaw, Harold Gillibrand, told me a lot about using Hurricane. And he thought it was a very, very good engine indeed. And there was another one at Bickershaw called Fred. And that had the Underfeed apparatus put onto it. And again, one of the older drivers told me that Fred was his favourite engine. There were very, very good steamers with this device on.
Was that to single man though?
The stoker idea was, yes, for single manning, and also because of using smaller coal, using fine coal, inferior coal.
I asked Steven why steam locomotives stayed working in the collieries much longer than they did anywhere else.
Well, I mean, with the northwest area of the NCB, again, going back to Joe Cunliffe at Walkden, because he was keen on steam locomotives, that's probably why the northwest area kept on with steam for a long time. And another thing is that in the 70s, the NCB started up a scheme where the collieries were actually hiring the locomotives that they had from sort of the central area workshops or headquarters. and it was a lot cheaper to hire a steam engine than it was a diesel. I seem to remember that the rates I quoted were £60 a week for a diesel and £18 a week for a steam engine. This is what I was told at Bickershaw.
Can't go wrong with that, can you?
So this is one of the reasons. And then there are other things, like at Bowl Colliery, you had a surface superintendent there, Harry Simmons, who was very, very keen on steam engines. He was an ex-driver himself, and that's why they kept steam on at Bowl Colliery. He knew they were very, very reliable. I mean, if a diesel failed, often it would just stop working, whereas a steam engine, you can have multiple defects and it'll still carry on doing the job. Right, okay, so we're going to go on to the footplate now, and into the cab, and have a look at the controls on the locomotive.
Coming up next is part 2 of the series on the Austerity. Hope you're enjoying it, and don't forget to subscribe.